Story 1. Breakups are always hard, even when you know they are for the best. I have been doing my best to hold myself together after ending things with my boyfriend of 2.5 years. I do not want to dive too deep into it. There was no big fight, no wild drama. We just realized we were not right for each other anymore. That does not mean it was easy. Some days, it felt like everything around me reminded me of him. I have been sticking to the no-contact rule, telling myself it is the healthiest way for both of us to move on. It has been tough though, really tough. One of the things I missed the most about our relationship was playing pool together. It was our thing. I am a pretty decent pool player, better than average for sure, but my ex, he was something else. On his good days he could pull off trick shots like they were nothing. 1-rail, 2-rail banks, kick shots, combos, you name it. He was even learning how to pull off a standard mass shot. We both had pool tables at home, but staying in every night got old fast. When we went out, we always picked bars with pool tables. We hated the loud, overcrowded bars where you had to wait forever for a table. So we found these quiet little dive bars that attracted an older crowd. The tables were always a bit worn out, and the floors were sticky, but we did not mind. Regulation tables in perfect condition are rare in bars anyway, and those places felt like our sweet spot. We were usually the youngest people there, but it never bothered us. By then, we were over the typical college scene of partying every night. I am a little shy, but my ex had this charm that could win anyone over. And it did not hurt that we were both decent at pool. A few weeks ago, I found myself missing that part of my life more than usual. It was a random Wednesday, so none of my friends were available, and I was tired of sitting at home feeling sorry for myself. On a whim, I decided to go to one of the bars we used to frequent. I told myself it was not about reliving old memories. I just needed to get out. Normally, I do not have the confidence to go out alone, but that night was different. When I walked in, it was like stepping back in time. The dim lighting, the worn-out stools, and the jukebox in the corner were all just as I remembered. The familiarity felt comforting, but it also hurt a little. Memories of him flooded back, and for a second, I almost turned around and left. But I stayed. I grabbed a couple of drinks and wandered over to one of the pool tables, picking up a cue and idly chalking it. I had no real plan. Playing solo felt awkward. Before I could overthink it, a guy walked up. He looked to be in his mid-20s, probably the only person there close to my age. He leaned on the table and asked if I was up for a game. I shrugged and said, "Rack 'em up." He dropped some quarters in the slot and started setting up the balls. I laughed quietly to myself when I noticed he racked them wrong, but I let it slide. We played a few rounds and I started to loosen up. He was not bad, not as good as my ex, but definitely not a beginner. I did not take it easy on him, though, and I won every game we played. We chatted while we played, and he even bought me a couple of drinks. He was friendly enough, but it quickly became clear he was not the sharpest tool in the shed. I tend to be drawn to quick-witted guys who can hold their own in a conversation, and this guy did not really fit the bill. But I did not mind. It was nice to just play and talk without overthinking everything for once. By the fourth game, he popped the question. Did I want to go back to his place? The question caught me off guard, though I guess I should not have been too surprised. I hesitated for a second before shaking my head with a little smile. I told him playfully that he would need a second date for that. The truth was, I was not ready to take that kind of step. Not on some random Wednesday night. It was not a bad evening, though. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. Turning him down did not go over well. His whole demeanor changed in an instant. His smile vanished, replaced by a scowl so intense it caught me off guard. Then he said, "Are you serious?" and grabbed my wrist. Before I could even process what was happening, he muttered something about spending money on the drinks and yanked my purse right off the table. I had never been in a situation like that before. Instead of screaming or fighting back, I froze. Even though we were in a public place, fear gripped me and I could not move. Thankfully, a couple of older guys sitting at the bar noticed what was going on and came over to help. Honestly, I do not know what I would have done if they had not stepped in. One of them told the guy to let me go. The man glared at me, muttered something under his breath, and then tossed my purse back onto the table before storming out of the bar. My heart was racing, and I was still shaking as I thanked the two men over and over again. That was it for me. I was done for the night. I called an Uber and left the bar, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. On the ride home, I leaned back and decided to close my eyes for a bit. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the driver was gently waking me up. We were parked across the street from my house. I thanked him, climbed out of the car, and began walking toward my door. As I rummaged through my bag for my keys, I impulsively checked my phone for the first time since leaving the bar. That was when I saw it. A notification flashed on the screen. AirTag found moving with you. My stomach dropped. My hands started to shake as I frantically searched through my purse, tossing aside my wallet, makeup, and everything else until my fingers brushed against something unfamiliar. I pulled it out and stared at it, my heart pounding. It was an AirTag. Panic washed over me, far more intense than anything I had felt earlier. Standing there on the dark street, I threw the AirTag to the ground and stomped on it repeatedly until I was sure it was destroyed. I wanted to scream but held it in, my breaths coming fast and shallow. I needed to get inside. Looking around nervously, I saw no one, but I knew that whoever had planted the AirTag, probably that guy from the bar, now had my location. Maybe not my exact house, but close enough to find me. My street is quiet, with houses spaced far apart, which meant it would not take long for him to narrow it down. Grabbing my purse, I sprinted to the back door. My hands fumbled with the lock as I struggled to stay calm. Finally, the door clicked open, and I rushed inside, slamming it shut and locking it behind me. My heart was hammering in my chest so loudly I could hear it. I was safe, but the shaking would not stop. I went upstairs to my room, trying to make sense of how I had gotten into this mess. Normally, I am asleep by 10 and out for 9 or 10 hours, but I knew there was no way I was going to get any rest that night. Standing by my bedroom window, I looked out at the street, hoping that maybe the familiar view would calm me down. But then I saw it. An old, beat-up Lincoln was driving slowly past my house. At first, I thought it was nothing unusual. Cars occasionally passed by, even late at night. But then it came back, heading the other way, moving even slower this time. That was when the knot in my stomach tightened. The third time it passed, there was no denying it. The driver was scanning the houses, moving deliberately. My heart sank as the realization hit me. It was him. It had to be. He was trying to find my house. I felt a scream rising in my throat as the car crept past again. As the car passed again, I noticed the driver's side window was rolled halfway down. My stomach churned with fear. I wanted to call the police, but I was paralyzed. In my panicked mind, I thought if I made it obvious I was on to him, it might somehow make things worse. I know it sounds irrational, but I was too terrified to think clearly. The next time the car crept by, the driver's hand was hanging out of the window, holding something. My heart dropped when I realized what it was. A knife. Instead of passing by like before, the car came to a stop in the middle of the road, directly across from my house. I ducked down below the window, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I crouched there, frozen, too scared to move. Minutes felt like hours as I stayed hidden, trying to convince myself that the nightmare would end if I just stayed still. Eventually, when I worked up the courage to peek out the window, the car was gone. I waited for what must have been an hour, staring out into the dark, empty street, expecting the car to reappear. But it never did. The next morning, I told my parents everything. My dad was furious that I had not called the police, but I explained I had been too scared and panicked to do anything. Dad decided to reach out to one of his friends, a police chief, for advice. His friends said that without more evidence, like the car's license plate number, there was not much they could do. He warned us to call the police immediately if we ever saw the car again. I did not leave the house for days after that. Even now, I feel like he might be out there somewhere, watching and waiting for me to leave the house again. The car has not returned, though. Maybe the nightmare is over. I can only hope. Story 2. I would not call my life exciting, but it is steady, and I cannot complain. I am 40 years old, single, and have no kids. Some folks might think that sounds lonely or even sad, but honestly, it suits me just fine. I have a reliable job, a cozy little house, and the freedom to live life on my own terms. I work as a bartender at a swanky rooftop bar in a nearby town. It is the type of place that attracts people who would never set foot in a regular bar. My own lifestyle is a far cry from the glitz and glamour of that world. My house is in a quiet, middle-of-the-road neighborhood about a 20-minute drive from work. Still, there are some real upsides to the job. The tips are phenomenal. Folks in that part of town are not shy about throwing cash around. Plus, the ever-changing crowd keeps things fresh. This bar is not the kind of place where you get regulars like you would in a dive. That works out for me since I prefer to keep people at arm's length. I have never liked how some customers treat bartenders like their personal therapists. Maybe that is just my personality. I like my space. Oh, by the way, my name is Mike. That will matter later on. It was a Friday night, our busiest night of the week. The place was packed as always. Groups of friends celebrating something, couples on dates, and a few people who probably just wanted to soak up the upscale atmosphere. I like to play this little guessing game while I work, trying to figure out which of the patrons are putting on a show and which ones are being themselves. You can learn a lot about a person just by the way they order a drink. The ones who go for complicated cocktails, they are probably out to impress someone. The ones who order a whiskey neat, they have had a rough day. Toward the end of the bar, there was a couple finishing up their wine. I always make a point to offer a refill before they have to flag me down. I was in my rhythm, pouring drinks and chatting casually with customers, when someone walked in and instantly caught my attention. This guy stood out like a sore thumb. He looked furious. His jaw was clenched, and he wore a scowl that could curdle milk. His jet-black hair was messy, sticking out in every direction like a bird's nest. His clothes did not help the impression. He had on a faded black hoodie underneath a beat-up leather jacket that had clearly seen better days. The jacket was filthy, covered in stains that screamed neglect. But none of that was as unsettling as the look on his face. The man stormed straight to the bar but did not take a seat. He just stood there, glaring at me like he was sizing me up for a fight. My first thought was, how did this guy slip past the doorman? But I kept my cool. Clearing my throat, I asked him if he wanted something to drink, keeping my tone as even as I could despite the bad vibe he was giving off. At first, he did not say a word, just kept staring at me like I had wronged him somehow. Finally, he muttered that he wanted a double shot of Jägermeister. That request was a little unusual for a place like this, but I nodded, grabbed a glass, and poured his drink. Jägermeister is not exactly a popular choice at our bar. Most of our guests go for something fancier, but hey, it is not my job to question anyone's taste. I slid the glass over to him and turned my attention back to the other customers. When I returned to collect payment, he tossed a crumpled wad of cash onto the counter. That threw me off a bit. Hardly anyone pays in cash at this place. Still, I rang him up without a fuss. Just as I was about to move on, he spoke again. His words are still burned into my memory. I knew I would find you here, Mike. I froze, my brain scrambling to process what he had just said. Slowly, I set the glass I was holding down and met his eyes. How do you know my name? I asked, my voice low but firm. I did not want to cause a scene, but I needed answers. He did not respond right away, just kept staring at me with the same unsettling intensity. Finally, he said, I know what you did. Before I could ask him what the hell he was talking about, he turned and walked away toward the elevators. I stood there, stunned, watching him go. Part of me wanted to yell after him or chase him down, but I could not just abandon my post. Instead, I stayed rooted to the spot, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I had no idea who that guy was, and for the life of me, I could not think of a single thing I might have done to provoke such a cryptic accusation. I am no angel, sure, but nothing came to mind that would explain this. If I have learned one thing in life, it is that making enemies never ends well. The whole ordeal at the bar left me in a foul mood for the rest of my shift. By the time I finally clocked out and drove home, my mind was still spinning. I kept replaying the scene, searching for any kind of explanation that made sense. But no matter how hard I thought about it, I came up empty. When I finally crawled into bed, I still felt uneasy. It took me a while to fall asleep, and even then, my rest was anything but peaceful. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up. It was strange because I am usually the kind of guy who sleeps straight through until morning. I did not have to use the bathroom, and the house was completely quiet. Still, something felt off. I stayed perfectly still, my eyes open, waiting for them to adjust to the darkness. It took about a minute, but then I noticed something that sent a jolt of fear through my entire body. In the corner of my bedroom, right next to the door, there was a shadowy figure. It was standing completely still, blending into the darkness, but I knew without a doubt that it was not supposed to be there. My heart started pounding like a drum, but I forced myself to stay calm. I lay there, pretending to still be asleep, while my brain struggled to process what was happening. Someone was in my room. Someone had broken into my house. I repeated that thought to myself over and over until the reality of it sank in. I knew I had to act fast. I silently counted to 3, and then, in one swift motion, I leaped out of bed and let out a blood-curdling scream, hoping to scare the intruder. I was ready to fight, but to my surprise, the figure did not charge at me. Instead, it turned and bolted for the door. As the intruder fled, I heard something hit the floor with a sharp clatter. I chased him through the house, but by the time I reached the front door, it was wide open. Whoever had been in my room was long gone. For a split second, I considered running outside to look for him, but then a terrifying thought crossed my mind. What if he was luring me into a trap? I decided not to take any chances. Instead, I slammed the door shut and locked it tight. I stood there for a moment, trying to catch my breath. Then I remembered the sound I had heard earlier in my bedroom. I went back to check, flipping on the light. What I saw stopped me cold. Lying on the floor in the corner of the room was a knife. One of mine. It had been taken from the kitchen. My stomach turned as the realization hit me. Whoever had broken into my house had planned to hurt me, maybe even kill me. I grabbed my phone and immediately called the police. They arrived within minutes, searching the house and the yard, but they found nothing. The intruder had vanished without a trace. I gave the officers a description of the man I had seen at the bar earlier that night. They collected video footage from the bar's security cameras, but so far, they have not been able to track him down. What haunts me the most is the fact that I am absolutely certain I had locked all the doors before going to bed. I double-checked them every single night. Yet, during their investigation, the police could not find any signs of forced entry. No broken windows, no unlocked doors, nothing. To this day, I have no idea how that man managed to get inside my home. I have not seen him since, but I would be lying if I said I do not think about it all the time. Story 3. Most evenings, I work as a bartender at a bar and grill located in a suburb just outside of Baltimore. The setup of this place is a bit unusual, so I will try to explain it clearly to help the story make sense. It is always busy, and unlike most places, there are no waiters here. It is just us bartenders up front and the cooks in the back. If you want food or a soda, you have to come to the bar, place your order, and pick it up yourself once it is ready. Why the management decided on this system, I could not say for sure. Probably to save money by not hiring a waitstaff. Either way, it keeps the pace quick, which I do not mind. For some reason, the place draws a crowd. Personally, I do not think it is anything amazing, but it is always lively. Most nights, the air is filled with good music, conversation, and laughter. Near the DJ booth, there is a small standing area where people gather to dance and mingle. The constant flow of customers and the upbeat vibe make my shifts fly by. I like meeting new people, so this job suits me well. Sitting around waiting for customers would drive me crazy, but I know some folks prefer slower-paced work. This particular night started off like any other. It was a weekend, so I knew we were in for a packed house. After a certain time, the bar was wall-to-wall with people. The crowd skewed younger that evening, mostly college kids. That usually means more dancing, more spilled drinks, and a wilder atmosphere overall. Unfortunately, it also means worse tips, which is not ideal for me. One group of students stood out, ordering round after round of tequila shots faster than I could set up the salt and limes. It is always chaos when college kids take over the bar. One guy in the group was so drunk he tried the same corny pickup line on me 3 times. I just laughed it off and kept moving. Amid the chaos, I noticed something unusual. An elderly couple had walked in and taken a booth in the corner of the restaurant. At first, I did not think much of it. I just thought it was a little odd for people their age to come to such a noisy, rowdy spot. But I was too busy to dwell on it and went back to pouring drinks. Maybe half an hour or so later, as I was mid-pour with a line of gin and tonics, my eyes wandered back to the couple. My hands kept working on autopilot, but my brain got stuck on them. That is when I noticed something strange. They were just sitting there, completely still. They had not ordered anything, no food, no drinks. I definitely would have remembered if they had. What really struck me was how they were sitting. Neither of them was looking at the other. Instead, they were both staring at the wall beside them. From where I stood, it did not seem like they were talking either. It was the weirdest thing. Curiosity gnawed at me, but the bar was slammed, and I did not have time to investigate. I figured maybe they were waiting for someone or just did not understand how the place worked. Perhaps they thought a waiter would come to take their order. When the rush finally slowed down, I decided to check on them. I walked over, put on my best polite smile, and approached their table. Neither of them turned to look at me as I got closer. They both kept staring at the wall, frozen like statues. I cleared my throat and asked if they wanted something to eat or drink. The woman did not react at all, not even a flinch. She just kept staring ahead. The man, though, slowly turned his head toward me. His movements were so slow it almost seemed unnatural. When I saw his face, a chill ran down my spine. His skin was pale and deeply wrinkled, and his eyes looked like they had sunken into his face. He did not say a word. He just stared at me for a moment before shaking his head. Once, firmly and silently. Something about the way he looked at me made my stomach twist into knots. I muttered something, I cannot even remember what, and hurried back to the bar. I could not shake the feeling that something about them was deeply off. They looked like they did not belong in this bar, or even in this time period. I avoided looking over at their booth for a long while. Eventually, the crowd thinned out, and the chaos died down. My mind wandered back to the couple. On impulse, I glanced over at the corner booth, and nearly dropped the glass in my hand. The glass I was holding nearly slipped from my hand when I glanced back at the booth. Both of them, the man and the woman, were staring directly at me now. Their eyes felt like they were burning holes right through me. I locked eyes with the woman, but she did not look away. She just kept staring. I cannot remember ever feeling so uneasy at work before. My heart was pounding, and my palms were slick with sweat. I quickly broke eye contact, turned away, and pretended to be busy with something, anything, just to avoid freaking out. When I finally got the nerve to glance back at their table, my stomach dropped. The booth was empty. Relief washed over me. I hate to admit it, but I was just glad they were gone. By the time we started closing up, though, I still could not get them out of my head. As I wiped down the bar, my coworker Karen was busy counting the tips for the night. Karen is what you would call a veteran. She has been working at this bar for years and takes pride in noticing every little detail about the customers who come in. I decided to ask her if she had seen anything strange that night. "Hey, Karen," I said casually. "Did you notice that older couple sitting in the corner booth earlier?" She gave me a puzzled look, like I had just asked her about something completely random. "What older couple?" she asked. I blinked, thinking maybe she had misheard me. "You know, the elderly couple," I said, pointing toward the empty booth. "They were just sitting there for a while, not eating or drinking." Karen crossed her arms and shook her head. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't see anyone like that tonight," she said flatly. Her response stopped me in my tracks. Karen is sharp. She remembers every face, every order, every outfit. In fact, she started rattling off a list of customers from that night, describing what they ordered and even what some of them were wearing. I forced out a laugh, trying to play it cool, but inside, I felt like I was unraveling. I knew what I had seen. I had spoken to them. How could she have missed it? By the time we locked up, doubt had started creeping in. Maybe I had imagined it. The thought made my stomach churn. As I walked to my car in the empty lot, my mind was racing, replaying every detail of the night. That is when I saw them. Across the street, under a lone streetlight, stood two dark figures. My heart stopped. It was them, the man and the woman. They were just standing there, perfectly still, as if they were waiting for something or someone. My blood turned ice cold. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I did not wait to see what would happen next. I bolted for my car, fumbled with my keys, and jumped inside. My hands were shaking so badly it took me a moment to lock the doors. As soon as I did, I started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. I did not dare look back. The drive home was a blur. My thoughts were racing, and my chest felt tight, like I could not breathe. I just kept repeating, "Oh my God," over and over, like some kind of mantra. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I still had no answers. How could Karen not have seen them? Were they even real? Or was I losing my mind? I wish I could tell you there is some kind of resolution to this story. But the truth is, I never saw those people again. I never found out who or what they were. And I do not think I ever will.